Ahoy YouTube, it's Professor Mimi from Card Fight Crash Course, and I have another deck tech for you today on Costume Idol Ulk. She's been difficult. I've been having a bit of a love-hate relationship with this deck. It's frustrating, but it's also kind of rewarding in a sense. It offers a lot of challenges with the deck building, since you are left with such an open-ended environment. She got very few support cards. You are left to piece together a lot of the puzzle yourself. And while she herself is a relatively strong effect, you get a restanding Vanguard and you get to restand your Rearguard, you're not restanding them, which comes with trade-offs. It's better than restanding until it's worse than restanding, because you can check crits to put on restanders, but you can't do that when you're picking them up. But when you do pick them up, you can rearrange your board and get on-play skills and whatnot. So it's quite challenging to bring out the most of this deck with how limited our options are. But I felt like I've done a pretty good job, and I don't feel like this is the final iteration of the deck. If I would feel very happy if some of y'all could take what I've built here and help it go somewhere even further beyond. But I have other decks I need to be working on for y'all, so you'll have to take the torch from here. I want to start by showing y'all our winning image, or at least its basic form, and then how we can add on little embellishments. Because she didn't get very many support cards, but the one that she did get that was the most useful is the Ring My Bell. She's a mermaid who has 2 skills, and I'd hate what order they're written in. The first skill is the one that you resolve second most of the time, and the second skill is the one we'll start with. You can Soul Blast 2 if you have an Ulk in your ride deck, or if your Vanguard is Ulk, to draw a card. And then her other effect is that when she is placed by Ulk's effect, she gets plus 10,000 power, and then she can Energy Blast 3 to bounce a card in her column, and then call a card from hand to her column. So she lets you, when she's flickered, when she's encored, you can flicker, you can encore the unit behind her. I like to use encore because it's like kind of a thematic thing, you know, they're doing a performance and you get to do it again, you get an encore. When in other games they would call that flickering or blinking, where it goes out of existence for a little bit and then comes straight back. You don't have to do that, you can pick out other things, but usually as we develop our board we end up picking up and putting down the same thing, so it's just an encore a lot of the time. You want to combo Ring My Bell with Airy Tempo, who lets us, when she attacks, if our Vanguard has placed something this turn with its effect, this battle phase, I believe, then you take a grade 2 card from your 2 or less card from your hand, put it into your soul and draw, and then she gets 10k. So while she isn't card advantage in herself, she is card filtering and selection in a sense. And then that'll feed her Soul Blast 2 effect. And the attack pattern gets a little weird with it. You attack with your Vanguard first, who then re-rides into another copy of herself. Then wave 2, you want to swing with what you want to restand. So we'll swing with Ring My Bell. We Soul Blast 2. And our ride line will have Soul Blasted 1 as well. So we'd be out of our ride line soul to have drawn a card. Then we attack with Ulk. Ulk picks her up and puts her down. Then you can swing with Airy Tempo to put a card into our soul and draw a card. And then if you have comboed with one of our front triggers that moves to soul, then with the soul from that and that soul, then you get to draw one more card. If you have the girl that can counterblast 1 to add an Ulk from our drop zone to our hand, then you could have Soul Blasted that instead. But that's a little silly. It's a little bit of a waste of a CB to do that when you don't need to, considering the Alk was going to get you the Alk back at the end of turn anyway. So you have to be careful not to Soul Blast it, because otherwise we would spend Counterblast 1, retire a rearguard to add an Alk to our hand, when we would have added it to our hand anyway. Yeah, sure, we drew a card which replaces that, but we're still out a CB for nothing. So that play is a little silly, but sometimes, you know, you're desperately digging for perfect cards. So it comes in handy to keep plays like that in mind. That's just the base for me of this, though. We can get pretty cute with it once we add on a little bonus. This deck had a real weakness with the back row and consistency. So to fix two issues in one, we have the Resonance of Reflection. She has two skills. Her second skill we will never use because it requires us to have a Kyrie Vanguard, but her first skill lets us Counterblast 1 to search the top 7 cards of our deck for a Mermaid, which is most of our cards except for Airy Tempo and one of the cards we'll get to later. But she also lets us find Prison Pearl and Twinkle Powder, which in the lore is how the mermaids get their legs. You've seen them with the leg arts and stuff. So they can perform on land. They have a special perfumey stuff they put on that gives them legs. So in gameplay that gives them boost. It has an act skill which we don't normally use. But once this card has boost, we can do some cute stuff with it. So an even bigger version of our winning image. Once because, you know, we have to add the Alk from our Soul to our hand, and then we can, on our next turn, Persona Ride, as long as we went to Limit Break. Boop. And we have enough cards in our damage zone. We're getting +10 from Persona Ride. We're getting +5 because we have an Alk on our Soul. We're getting +5 more since we're at Limit Break, so our front row is at +20. So we can swing for 33 with 2 drive checks. And then Alk pops out. We swing for 40. We swing for 43 with 1 drive check. We can pick her up, we can put her down, and while we may lose this rear guard, we can kind of make it worth it, because then she's going to get her own +10 on place. We're going to go place this. So we can swing for 60 on this side. And then, well, I guess you would probably swing with this one first in this case, because this is when it uses its skill 20, 30, 40, plus the 13k boost for 53 and 60. I mean, it's like it's contextual, of course, which order you do all the swinging in and blah, blah, blah. But that's quite a lot of power. If they want to hard block that, of course, that's going to take over 100,000 shield because we had +20 on 5 attacks. So it's a lot of push. And we still had an opportunity to draw quite a few cards. We got to, even though we had 1 soul. So if we had comboed that with one of our fronts, that would let us draw another card. Then we would take 2 more cards, put them into our soul to draw 2 more cards, so that next turn this will be live to draw us more cards. And phase this can float us into one of our Alks, and that goes to our hand during the end step, so then we're still held up for another turn like that, which can be quite a lot of push. So that ended up being how I strategized how we're going to do things. These 2 cards have a nice interaction together, where you can, especially once she's given a boost, she can restand your front row units in front of her, which lets you do some pretty cute stuff. Like this support card here doesn't normally get too much value, since we kind of want to discard it, so we don't want to call it to the board. But this isn't going to do anything until later, so we can get a first swing. And then once the Alk gets her 3rd swing, so 1, 2, 3, we flicker this, and then we get that. So that we can still have this held up without having to do too much extra work. This is what I mean about it not being strictly worse than restanding, because we got to do some rearranging. We could have done something like get this unit's on place skill, counterblast 1, look for something. We can use it a second time by encoring it, because this isn't phase restricted, so we can counterblast 1 and check the top 7 again. We can talk about what unit we're using. But of course, if our first check revealed a critical trigger, and then this unit is plus 10 and a crit, once we pick it up and put it back down, it will not have 10k and a crit, which is lame, but such is the price of things. So that's how we are trying to get things set up. We want to have boost, because this deck was not given very many good grade 1. It wasn't given very much of anything. Her particular support cards are very limited. She was given a grade 1, a grade 2, and a grade 3. The grade 1 lets us get 1 back from our drop zone. We are only playing 2 copies of her because her effect doesn't do anything until quite late in the game, and we have a lot of card churn. So we will go through a lot of our deck, and eventually we will see her, and she'll have a nice little spot in our back row, because we are a little bit of a bad spot for back row units. So she'll have a nice little slot she can fit in on the board, and then we'll have just enough counterblast to, at the end of the game, get back an Ulk from our drop zone to our hand. I've already talked about this one. And then her grade 3 gets plus 5k, 5k, as long as they have a mermaid. So she's an 18k attacker, she's got 5k shield. And then in the drop zone, as a hard once per turn, we can bind her to check the top 7 cards of our deck for an Ulk. If we whiff that check, it's a mandatory soul charge. So remember on that first attack pattern I showed you where we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we were short a soul. So this is another thing that can combo with it. So as long as we've seen some way of getting the extra soul, we can use her twice early on in the game and empty out our soul. Soul Blast 4 to draw 2 is a bit steep, but it lets us do something with that resource that could be kind of challenging to use otherwise. And then later on in the game, once we've found multiple copies of Airy Tempo, then we can use her. Like, we Persona Ride that, gets us 1 soul, we try again with this, or we have a front, we get another soul, then we get to swing with her, empty our soul, to draw a card, and we get 2 Airy Tempos in our next swings. We swing with Airy Tempo to draw 2 more, which sets up 2 more soul, so that this turn, next turn, we can Soul Blast 4, draw 2, and we can go between alternating drawing 1 and drawing 2 by properly weaving in the Air Tempo swings. I ended up playing 3 Airy Tempos, but I was quite tempted to play a 4th. Where did the rest of them go? There's 3. Oh, okay. I see. You are on 3 of the restander to combo with these. And the reason I ended up on just 3 is because we have quite a bit of card selection with access to our ride line and the other mermaid checker. So with our mermaid engine, we can call it, because the ride line needs you to ride a mermaid grade 3, and this is checking for mermaids. So we have a little engine of our mermaids churning together here, where there she is. We get 5 of our cards, 1 guaranteed plus 4 extra ones will let us check the top 7 for just any grade 2 or greater unit, guaranteed. So we can add Airy Tempo off of that, and then top 7 for any mermaid. We can add this. We get to use this to check top 7 for one of our Ulks, which we are of course maxed out on. We get access to almost all of our cards pretty easily, because we have 3 searchers, which are hittable off of both of our top 7 checks. And we have 7 cyclers, 3 precious, and 4 Myrtoas. The Myrtoas are findable off of the Counterblast top 7 check, and Pressure is findable off of Aqua and Sedna's top check. So it's quite easy for us to get an advantage riding up, because our ride line is plussing us, and then we get to easily plus from discarding. We have 10 cards that are nice discards, because while this might not get us a card immediately, it'll probably get us an Ulk if we haven't seen one yet. And if we have, then it draws us half of a card when you remove it, which is better than nothing. Pressure actually draws us a card, and Murtoa draws us a card very early on in the game, but later on in the game, from her bind zone, we can bind 2 of them to countercharge, and our countercharges let us draw a card. So very similar that once these are in our drop zones, they let us draw half of a card. So with our cards churn, we are trying to have as many cards as possible that let us draw half of a card. I was very, very high on this philosophy when making this deck. So I'm playing a playset of the fronts that go to soul, because again, blocking with these draws us half a card when every 2 of our soul is letting us draw a card. So with lots of things that'll get us extra soul, we can quite easily look through all the cards we want to look through. The last few main deck slots here are for an Opariris, an Ace unit, and our Regalis piece. This one was a bit of a slam dunk. The Ace unit is pretty good in this deck because most of our first attacks are kind of weak. So the Ace unit lets us swing for 20 even if we haven't used its unique skill. And then we can support it with her for 30. And then we don't feel bad calling over the Ace unit. So we can quite easily use it to draw a card, let something float, get a big swing, call over it. Because on our first attack, this isn't getting any power. This isn't getting any power. This never gains power. This could get 5k and swing for 18, which is fine. But swinging for 20 or 25 is the best we can do. It's a little bit challenging to use all of the energy skills in this deck, but you just have to be very thoughtful. Sometimes if you're going to be swinging for something your opponent you're expecting them to take, like they really want a damage for whatever reason, then you can try swinging with this unboosted so that you can save the energy from restanding a booster or something. Remembering that if you have a lot of these energy cards early, Murtoa can be paid with soul, and not being afraid to use the counterblast on Pressure. When I've been playing this deck, I actually haven't bothered countercharging with Murtoa of the 8-9 games I played. I just never ended up needing it because I was so efficient with my counterblast usage. But this is the first version to have Murtoa's and Precious. Individually, they were quite fine, but like this, it could be a little awkward. But as long as you're very thoughtful with your resource usage, you should be able to make everything work just fine. Just remember that this can be paid with Counterblast. Don't tunnel in on having to pay the energy, because Murtoa's will give you some Counterblast late. You don't have to be spamming this to check the top 7. Sometimes you just don't need anything. It refunds you if it whiffs, but what if you check and there's nothing you actually really want and you just take something mediocre when what you really want is a perfect card? And this can add mermaids, and our perfect cards are mermaids, but it doesn't add sentinels, so that's unfortunate. So we have to draw as many cards as possible looking for them. That was one of the real issues I ran into, was somehow I just felt like I had very little shield. Maybe I was getting my perfect cards were on vacation or something, and I just wasn't getting lucky in drawing those. But even though I had drawn quite a lot of cards, it felt like I wasn't very tanky in a sense. I had so many extra little 5k cards lying around, 5k shield cards lying around that I didn't have a good use for. So for the Regals piece, I just decided to go with Twin Cast, because I felt like that would help with the shield values. Out of the other Blitz Order Regals pieces, none of them really stood out. This card is just always good, it's never bad. It has cute synergy even with Airy Tempo, where we can put this into our Soul and then Soul Blast it to draw, and then it's still going to get value from our drop zone. Whereas very few of our other cards are going to do that. It's just Murtoa. And you could attempt to do that with the Fiery Gallus, but she doesn't let you put the Fiery Gallus into your Soul. But I could see you playing the Fiery Gallus. After thinking about it for a little while, I realized that maybe if I'm struggling to find perfect cards, having something that can find one, if I I'm drawing. Where are my perfect cards? There's probably one in the top 5, so you could use the Fiery Gauss to call one, and then we can use her to pick it up and then call something else, which is one of the big advantages of an Encore instead of a Restand. Like I said, you get to swap out what you have there, so by swapping out a defensive card that you recruited off the top into an offensive card that might have been dead in your hand otherwise, you can much more efficiently take advantage of all of your cards. The last card here, Opariris, is pretty cute. Some part of me wanted to play a second copy, but I ran out of space pretty quickly. But you can't use his effect very well the second time. You can. Eventually one of your alks is going to be out of rotation, but for most of the game, you're not going to be able to bind one of your alks, so you won't be able to use a second copy of this card. But you can, so like if you see one and you can like invoke it, or you're going to call it, or you're going to use its skill to add back an alk, and then you can use your bouncing effects to add it back to your hand and then swap it out with something else and then block with it and use both of its moves. So you can still get the full value of having activated its effect twice with just one copy of it. So I didn't feel too bad just playing the one. We see quite a lot of our deck, so it's quite likely we do find one, but we're not like actually going to see our whole deck like Night Rose or something. We're going to see a very limited subsection of our deck. The only things to really note here... Oh, I guess one last thing to cover before I talk about the curve of our deck. One last little funny card choice is that I was playing the yellow over trigger, which I thought was really funny, because Ulk is one of our weakest attacks of the turn, and recently Alicia, a BCS champion, has started to play yellow OT in a lot of decks with weak vanguards. Because your opponent, when we're swinging for 60 with Airy Tempo, and we're swinging for 33 with Ulk, it's quite tempting to want to save your perfect guard for the one that's 60 and try and hard block one of the weaker swings. Or even on just the turn where she's like 13, and this is still swinging for 30, 40. You don't want to perfect guard this. It's so small. Why would you want to perfect guard her? Whenever your vanguard isn't getting perfect guarded, yellow's actually pretty good, because then you break through the attack by retiring all of the guardians, and you can still give 100 million to something. On vanguards that are small but have natural crit, it's really strong, like the Ave Mujica deck. But even in this deck, you can still do something pretty silly where you just do exactly that. You break through, you draw a few more cards, and then you get to give 100 million to something. None of the other over triggers felt particularly great. Blue's good as always. It's a fine one. You get to add something back from your drop zone. Red is decent since you have some on-attack effects. I believe this is a once per turn. Oh, this is not a once per turn. That's super neat. So you can restand this, and you could get to double dip off of it, where you get to put in 2 bad cards to draw 2 new cards, and then you could then Soul Blast with this one, or Soul Blast 2. So red OT could be pretty cute. Purple OT was challenging. I tried playing with that one, but it was just really awkward. You end up, because the attack pattern, where you swing with Ulk, side lane, Ulk, and then your last 2, you get in this weird situation where purple can very easily cut you off of an attack, where you like want to swing, like swing, but then like if you check purple, it just gets really awkward. It wasn't bad, but half the time I checked it, I had to call a booster, which didn't feel very good. So I would just probably recommend that you don't play purple and that you play anything else. Blue and red are both very good for different things. Yellow is funny. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was game-changing. But your over-trigger choice isn't actually very impactful, since you very rarely check it. And when you do, it's on offense about as often as it is on defense, give or take. So it's just a funny choice. I thought it was a good opportunity to talk about the way you can use it to break through weak vanguards. Feel free to do what you want to do. I'm not your mom. avoiding any of the particular card choices for just now, I want to talk about the curve of our deck and what turns all these cards become useful. Our cyclers, for the most part, are useful starting from turn 1. Pressure is a little awkward because if we're going first, she's not useful turn 1, so we can kind of put her like in this halfway zone. But discarding any of these is all we really have to do turn 1. Turn 2, we can counterblast 1 to check the top 7. We can use our ace unit, and then twin cast becomes live, and so does the Precious. Operaris is kind of outside of time. He fits kind of like, he's good in many different phases of the game. You can call him as a grade 1 for booster strats and then pick him up later, because with Ulk you don't have to pick up and then put down to the same column. You can even pick up her booster, so like if you had called Operaris early, you can swing like this, pick up the Operaris, and then call our grade 2 of choice, who we can then call a different card of choice from hand, letting us do some cute little plays. So he's kind of useful early, but you kind of don't really feel like calling him all the time because that's jumping through some hoops. So it's really awkward to tell you what turn he fits it on. This technically could be used on turn 2 if you found a soul front or something, because on turn 2 we would have our 0 and our 1 on our soul, but our 1 soul blasts our 0, so we only have 1 soul. So without an additional card that will move to our soul, we can't actually take advantage of this effect until turn 3. Airy Tempo doesn't do anything until turn 3. This is a grade 3 set order, so it also doesn't do anything until turn 3. We need to play all of our Ulks, and they, of course, don't do anything until turn 3. And then these do kind of work similar to Operaris, where they're useful early because they're just grade 1s that can come to board and be useful, but their actual skills aren't going to be live until much later on in the game, where you're not going to be wanting to recycle something until pretty late, and this does the same thing, where it's just a recycle but it doesn't cost a counterblast. So we end up having 3 cards in this slot that let us recycle. We end up having 3 cards in a lot of slots. If you noticed, we have 3 Ulks, well, of course, 3 Airy Tempos, 3 Ring My Bells, only 2 Prism Powders. We have 4 of our top 7 check, the Resonance of Reflection, 3 Precious from Myrtoas, and 3 of the Craft Wreath. We can get away with a lot of 3-ofs, especially with some of our key cards here, because of how much of that card selection we get access to. Where if we have, I was playing 4 of many of the cards in this deck, and it just felt like too many. This was too many at 4, but I felt like it was still pretty, we need to have Elk. So I felt like if I went to 2 of this, I might not have as much ability to find the Ulk as I would like. Again, we need to see Ulk, so I play this at 4 to maximize our chance of seeing Ulk, because we don't do anything if we don't find Ulk. We have to find Ulk, but this is a hard once per turn that doesn't start until turn 3, and this is live on turn 2, so I felt like shaving this was a good idea, and I think it was in the end. 3 of our big winning image piece, 3 of each, seems a little sketchy. But we have plenty of time to draw our cards, and if we don't find Airy Tempo, it's a bit unfortunate, but we have other grade 2s we can counterblast 1 to just keep spamming that. We can turn almost all of our counterblasts into top 7 checks, and then hopefully we'll have thinned enough to draw this eventually. And then once we find one, it kind of helps you find the next one, because you start to draw an additional card. It'll put a card in and let you draw one, which will turn on this to draw you another card. So this will draw you 2 cards, then 4 cards, and 6, and the game usually doesn't go past that. We end up with not too much actual actionable plays early on in the game, where these cards can't go to board, and while these kind of can, where it leaves us with like 8 cards that we can do something with aggressively, efficiently early on in the game. We can call these, and I think maybe that's part of why I wasn't feeling as successful on it, as I was too worried about our rear guards getting retired. But I think you just have to play aggressively with what you do have. Because if you're just ride, swing, passing, your first grade 3 turn isn't actually very impactful going first, because your front row is hardly gaining any power. They check a defensive, they can just shut off your turn. And your Persona Ride turn is really big, and they need 100,000 shield if they block everything. But if they're at 2, and they can no guard 3 of those, and they have a perfect guard, then it just takes like 3 triggers to stop your super big turn of doom. And again, we don't have that much shield somehow. So it gets tough to live one of their Persona Ride turns. This deck is kind of like a force deck in the end, and this is kind of like a force marker with extra steps. So you need to play like one. You need to not be so attached to your rear guards. You need to be attached to pressure. You need to be exerting pressure early, which means you need to tri-lane them. You have to call your important grade 2s and attack. Even if you're really worried that they'll kill this or that, they kind of don't know what your deck does a lot of the time, so they probably won't. They didn't to me anyway. And if they do that to you and they start swinging at your rear guards, you have so many 5Ks that later on in the game, I think that's going to come back to save you, or you were able to stave off an extra turn because they spent time attacking your rear guards, or you might get a second or maybe even a third Persona Ride turn. Because if you find all your perfect guards, maybe you do get a third one. We end up with 5 pieces of true top end, 3 bits of recycling for said top end. We have like 14 cards to boost our consistency. And we have 6 beefy beaters that go with that top end for like 11 cards that are really 12 cards that really let us push. And these kind of help us do both. She's going to help us get cards to push, but she can also get us our resources, which can be used for defense. So she fits kind of in the middle. Most of this leads us to have a medium early game, so you need to try your best to make the most of it, because your end game isn't going to mean very much if you don't have a good early game to back it up, because then it's not really your like late game, it's become the mid game, because it becomes the late game around when people start Persona Riding. But if you are the first to Persona Ride and your opponent's at 2, it's not really late game yet. If they can safely take your Vanguard, it's not really late game. That's how we used to think about it back in the day. That's how you get to the end of the game, is when they can safely take it. Or when they can and cannot safely say no guard your Vanguard, which is usually at 4. In Stride decks, or in Stride formats, that can be around 3 instead, because they have one more drive check, so you're a little bit more likely to get double crit. But if you're at 2, or if your opponent's at 2 or 3 on your Persona Ride turn, then you haven't actually reached the end game per se. Maybe you'll kill them, but you probably won't. So in order to make sure that you have those impactful turns with the right setup, it's very important to leverage a good early game. You might consider using all of your counterblast that you get early to spam this effect to check the top 7. And even if they cut you off of counterblasts, remember you can use Mirtoa to countercharge, so don't be afraid about counterblasting out. You need to get a good early game. So I think it is going to end up being wise to play some of these cards to get extra boosts and whatnot. And the only issue I ran into is, what do I do to add in those slots I want? Before I was playing some Franchettes, which didn't feel like they did anything, which was really surprising to me. Franchette felt like she was really strong. I thought I'd be able to weave her balance effect into my attack patterns to like do something like this boosts Franchette attacks, Franchette's on bounce, pick this up, use Alk to call her back down, call Airy Tempo, and then I can get some extra value without having to call over anything. I can use it to have a good early game where I can push without exposing my pieces to danger. And it was okay, but I felt like I wasn't able to effectively use my energy as much as I wanted. I didn't have as much, since I didn't have as much shield as I wanted. It's probably because I wasn't drawing enough cards to find my cards with real shield, aka my perfect cards. We draw some cards, but we don't draw that many when we're playing fronts. We're getting all of our card draw from these two effects, because Myrtoa is not going to actually get us to draw too many cards throughout the game. Then we get like 1, maybe 2 draws off of Myrtoa. These other 2 aren't going to do anything except for Counterblast do 1. So maybe on turn like 7, they'll let you draw 1 more card with this. But it doesn't usually convert too much. In fact, I was relatively unhappy with Myrtoa, but I felt like she has decent synergy enough with the deck where you'd want to keep her around. So this is something to consider cutting. You could put in like another Pressure. I was considering playing the Soul Blast Cyclers, the Pride Cyclers, the Rainbow Bridge, because Soul Blasting 2 to draw is decent, but Soul Blasting 1 to get, it's kind of like, it's not a draw, but it has more shield than most of our draws. And if we Soul Blast 2, we'll get 20k shield, whereas with the Soul Blast 2 with this, we'll never draw 20k shield. Well, I mean, best we draw is like Twin Cast, or Over Trigger, or a Perfect Guard, which all don't literally have to. Okay, so this has 20k. But that's it. It's very limited options. And considering what we're doing with our Soul, Yuika doesn't fit in really. Like, I mean, you can do some cute stuff, or like you have like Yuika and her, you pick her up, then you use Alk to pick her up, to put her down, to call Franchette to pick this up, but it's like, did you need to even do that? Franchette could have done that, so then the Yuika's Soul Blast just does nothing, and it cuts us off half of a card draw, so she just doesn't end up fitting in to the deck here. This is where you can kind of see that challenge of, we didn't have very many Alk named cards. We're playing these 8 support pieces, plus the actual Alks themselves for 11 Alk cards, and the rest of these are generic. In a sense, I mean, these are actually generic. This has, in a sense, become part of our archetype. We've made it into, so it's a generic, but not really. It's a fairly narrow card, whereas this is a much more wide card to check the top 7 for all sorts, any mermaid, whereas this lets us, after a Vanguard has done a very specific thing, so like wave 4 or 5, we can use this to get an extra draw, which is much more narrow than just, okay, guard with it, draw, or discard this, draw, call it, do the thing, no strings attached. It becomes difficult to fill out these slots effectively, especially when our resources are a little tight, especially if we're actually planning on using the Soul Blast 2 to draw. So maybe that's where you could try and take this. If you are unhappy with things, you could try playing the Pride Cyclers, because you can use the Soul Blast 2 to draw as like a bonus, and if you don't, that's fine. You don't need to. I would not recommend playing the deck without the top 7 check for Alk. My first tournament run I played with this deck, I did not have these. I was playing Blue Hair Prodigy Resius and some other nonsense. And I was absolutely crushing people until I made it to the finals against Alicia, and I did not find Ulk until turn 5. I hadn't seen any. I used the other top 7 check that's in the archetype to check for Ulks, but just no luck. If you do not find Ulk, you do not do anything. Having a whole playset of this will give us 2 more top 7 checks, and that basically is going to double our odds of finding Ulk, because we get a top 7 check, we get a top 5 check, which is great, and then we get 1 top 7 check, so we get 2 top 7 checks and top 5 checks. Doubling the amount of top 7 checks we do approximately doubles the odds of finding the Ulk, especially considering the other checks are then going to be thinner for the Ulks, because even if we don't hit, like if we use this on turn 2 after we use Setup, then that's going to make Aqua's activation more likely to hit, and this activation more likely to hit, and then this activation more likely to hit. And we're relatively likely to find Ulk, so, I mean, it's not really doubling the odds if it was greater than 50%. It's more like having the chance that we whiff. It makes it very unlikely that we don't find Ulk, but we have to find Ulk, so I recommend playing all of these. You don't need to play the Prism Pearl Twinkle Powder. It's cute. I was kind of enjoying it, but this basically lets you have boosters, so why not just cut this 4 boosters? It just gets tough to have boosters. As you saw, we put in more cards that end up in our front row potentially. So the only cards that kind of work in our back row, I thought, were like Racius, the blue-haired prodigy, who's the 3k on place, gives something +10. Everything else felt a little awkward. Feel free to explore to look for nice grade 1s to play, but I couldn't find anything that felt nice. Honestly, it felt like the best grade boosters we had were grade 2s. I thought it was really neat to be able to use our Encore as a back row. Instead of restanding our booster, why not have it restand the attacker? Because there are decent on-attack triggers like Franchette and Airy Tempo. I have seen a lot of lists play Franchette, but you could probably try, if you hate Prison, I could see doing something really funny where you like play 2 Franchettes and 2 of the 7 Hues Bridge, because you get to see quite a lot of your deck, and then Franchette can let you use your Prison to, like, you can feed them your Perfect Guard, call it out, Franchette to bounce it, and other important cards, and then you can use this to feed them tickets when they rip from your hand, which is neat. I'm probably going to end up giving some variation of things like this a try. Franchette wasn't impressing me, but the 7 Hues Bridge might, because then it lets us use our Soul perhaps more efficiently, because Soul Blasting 1 to get 10k shield versus Soul Blasting 2 to get a card isn't necessarily strictly better or worse, but I feel like on average Soul Blasting 2 to draw is not the rate that standard is at. A lot of decks use Soul Blast 1 to go +1. I'm thinking like Strega, T-Fault, Deeplands Maedith, cards like that where you can Soul Blast 1 to call something off the top 5. It's kind of like drawing a card. It's a Soul Blast 1 to go +1, and we're Soul Blasting 2 to go +1. It's directly to our hand, so that's nice, but we have ways of getting cards from our board onto our hand anyway. So I think that about covers everything I wanted to talk about here. It has so much flexibility since the deck building space is wide open with the lack of support cards she has, and the fact that she kind of works really well with a lot of the generic cards because she can restand anything. So perhaps I am being a little too narrow-minded trying to find use for her in archetype card, when maybe this card is just not as strong as I want it to be. But I feel like this card really shines when you can use it to restand and on attack trigger. So if you own Franchettes, then I would recommend giving it a shot to see how you feel. But looking at this deck here, other than Pressure, maybe I guess Twin Cast, everything is pretty cheap. All the cards from the new set are pretty cheap. I don't think this is expensive. Airy Tempo is definitely not expensive. This is a random common, so it's not. This is probably like $5 or $6. But then the point is that most of this deck could cost less than a playset of Franchette or Precious. So if you don't own these, there are definitely some substitutions you can make. So feel free to put in whatever cards that you have that you think would be powerful in the expensive card slots, so that you can pick this up for a lot less. Because without this, you put in like, I don't know, whatever Regals piece you have. And if you don't have the soul fronts or whatever, that's not a big deal either. You can make this deck work on a budget, and it's not going to be very much different from how it behaves in this version, which I would say I had basically no budget when putting this together, since I already have all of the lyrical cards. I already have a playset of Franchette and Yuikas and Precious and this and that. But most of them just don't end up fitting in here, so this is a deck you can play without breaking the bank. If you don't want to. If you want to bust it open and get FFRs of this and that, then go right ahead. I think even the shinier versions of Alk are pretty cheap too. I think it look good in silverware as well. The mermaid language one looks really neat. I'll hold it up. The one time I'll hold something up to the camera. You're not having a stroke. That is not English. This is the mermaid language version of the card, which I don't like, but I also really appreciate it for what it does for the artwork. It really makes it pop out when like the triple rare version is like, she has her blanket on. You can't really see what's going on here. But this is way fancier. If you want this fancy one though, hit me up. Nina, the rate player, pulled it, and none of us really want it that bad. So if you want it, we are willing to part ways with it. Just hit us up and we'll cut you a deal. We will cut you a deal. The comment section is always open. Speaking of the comment section, we have all of, well, not all of, we're still fiddling with things like Fennel, but we have all of the cards at least to build all the new lyrical decks and update all of the old ones. So if there are any lyrical decks that you would like to know about or anything else, feel free to leave a comment and I will work on it. We have Fennel coming up in the works. I believe Alicia is putting the finishing touches on that deck. Ray's Blaze is in a good spot according to her. Sweet Liquor made her sad, so that one might take a while. But if you don't have anything else to say, you might as well just leave a like and subscribe so that you can be notified when new videos like this go live. If you made it all the way to the end, then I hope that you actually enjoyed this. And if you did enjoy this, well, I have good news for you. I'm trying to do this every week. I'm trying to make something for you to enjoy. So check back in next week, and hopefully I'll have something wonderful for you to enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I really mean that. Spread love and be kind. Bye.